I'm Alex, 25. And I've always thought of myself as someone who keeps her head down and focuses on the job. My work is my pride, my routine, my shield. I never thought much about the people around me beyond the friendly nods, shared laughs, and the occasional coffee run. But as I look back now, I realize there were currents beneath the surface, things I couldn't see at the time or maybe just didn't want to. Daniel, my boss, is 35. She carries herself with that poised authority that makes you want to work harder just to impress her. She's sharp, ambitious, and when she wants to be, intimidating. I used to think her mood swings were simply a boss's prerogative, sometimes praising my work, other times tearing it apart like it was a personal offense. There were days when I'd spend hours on a report, certain it was flawless, only to have her glance at it and push it aside with a clipped, "Do it again." Then there were moments when she'd smile faintly, as if she wanted to say more, but the words never came. It never occurred to me that maybe those moods weren't about the work at all. Sometimes she'd find reasons to keep me in her office late, tiny tasks that could easily have been handled in the morning. She'd say things like, "We'll go over this together. No rush to head home, right?" Her voice would be light, but her eyes, there was something unspoken there. I'd glance up from my desk to find her watching me from across the room, expression unreadable. The moment I caught her, she'd turn away, pretending to focus on her computer. I wasn't paying much attention though. Not in the way she probably wanted. My focus was somewhere else entirely. Emma. Emma was 26, bright, and quick with a joke that could cut through the heaviest day. We started off as casual work friends, sharing snacks during long meetings, leaning toward each other to whisper sarcastic comments when a presentation dragged on. Coffee breaks became our thing. She'd appear by my desk, leaning against it with that easy grin and say, "Come on, you look like you need caffeine before you start turning into one of the spreadsheets you love so much." With her I felt relaxed. I didn't have to weigh my words or second-guess my tone. She'd listen to my little complaints about deadlines, and I'd listen to her talk about the book she was reading or the trip she wanted to take. Sometimes our conversations drifted toward the personal, relationships, childhood stories, even our quiet dreams. There were afternoons when the office buzz seemed to fade, and all I could hear was Emma's voice. She'd be telling me about her dog or the way her neighbor sang too loudly in the shower, and I'd catch myself smiling without realizing it. She had a way of making everything lighter. I didn't think much about how my time with Emma might look to others. Why would I? She was my friend, my favorite person in the office, and that was that. But every now and then, I'd notice Daniel passing by when Emma and I were laughing over something, her gaze lingering for a second too long before she walked away. I assumed it was just her keeping an eye on her staff. If there was tension in the air, I didn't feel it, not yet. Back then, all I saw was the easy rhythm of my days. Work, coffee with Emma, occasional meetings with Daniel that I wanted to escape from as quickly as possible. I had no idea that under the surface things were shifting. No idea that soon the balance I took for granted would collapse entirely. It's strange how you can live in the middle of a story without realizing you're in it. How someone else's quiet feelings can run alongside your life, just waiting for the moment they finally rise to the surface. And for me, that moment was coming far sooner than I could imagine. That evening started like any other. I was tired, my shoulders aching from hours bent over my desk. All I could think about was a hot shower, maybe ordering something easy for dinner, and catching up on a show before bed. But when I stepped through the front door, the air in the house felt different. My parents were sitting in the living room, not watching TV, not reading, just sitting there with an envelope on the coffee table between them. My mother's hands were folded neatly in her lap, my father leaning back with that look he wore when he was trying to be calm about something important. "Alex," my mother said as soon as she saw me, "we need to talk." I glanced at the envelope. My name was written on the front in precise, elegant handwriting I recognized immediately, Daniel's. My stomach tightened. "What is that?" My father gestured for me to sit. "It came earlier today. Hand delivered." I sat, feeling my heartbeat pick up. My mother slid the envelope toward me, and I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a cream-colored card, thick, formal, with gold edging. The words were neatly typed, but I could still feel Daniel in every line. "Alex, I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to your family with the intention of making my feelings known, and to formally ask for your hand in marriage. I understand this may come as a surprise, but I assure you my intentions are sincere. Daniel. I read it twice before my brain caught up with the meaning. Marriage. She wanted to marry me. My first reaction was to laugh, a short, awkward sound that died almost immediately when I saw my parents' serious faces. This is a joke, right? Some kind of weird misunderstanding. My father shook his head. She came to the house herself, spoke to us about her feelings for you, said she wanted to do things the proper way. I stared at the card, the words blurring slightly. My boss, had just proposed to me through my parents. I felt heat crawl up my neck. Over dinner, the conversation was nothing short of excruciating. My mother asked gentle, probing questions. Do you like her? Has there been something between you we didn't know about? My father was more direct. This is a serious commitment, Alex. If you're not interested, you need to be very clear with her. I barely touched my food. My mind kept circling back to the last few months, replaying every strange moment with Daniel. The late nights she insisted I stay, the way she watched me sometimes when she thought I wasn't looking, the unnecessary one-on-one review sessions in her office. I had brushed it all off as quirks of her personality, maybe even professional favoritism. But now it all looked different. I thought of the time she'd given me a ride home when it was raining and insisted I take her scarf, pressing it into my hands with an almost shy smile. Or the small plant she left on my desk with a note that said, "Something to brighten your mornings." I had taken it as a kind gesture from a boss trying to be friendly. I didn't see the meaning layered beneath. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I felt. This wasn't just about awkward office dynamics anymore. This was my life, my job, my friendships. What would Emma think if she heard about this? That thought hit me hard, leaving a sour taste in my mouth. Emma. I hadn't told her yet, but I could already imagine the look on her face, the sharp edge in her voice. I pushed my plate away and leaned back in my chair. I don't know what to do, I admitted quietly. I didn't. I never thought of her like that. And now, I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Then you need to be honest with yourself and with her. Don't let this linger. But even as I nodded, I felt the weight of the situation pressing in from all sides. Daniel wasn't just anyone. She was my boss. Saying no wouldn't be simple. Saying yes was unthinkable. I excused myself early, retreating to my room. The card sat on my desk like it was staring at me, the gold edging catching the lamplight. I tried to picture Daniel writing it, tried to understand what had gone through her mind. And that's when the fear crept in, not fear of her exactly, but fear of what this would do to everything I thought was stable. Work, friends, my own sense of control. One letter, and it all felt like it was starting to unravel. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how something I hadn't even seen coming could already feel so heavy. I didn't have answers, only the uneasy certainty that my life at the office, and maybe outside it, would never be the same again. I barely slept that night, and by morning my chest felt tight, my thoughts tangled in knots. There was one thing I knew for sure. I had to tell Emma before she heard it from someone else. She'd understand once I explained. She had to. I texted her to meet me at the little cafe across from the office during lunch. She replied with a short fine. No emoji, no warmth. My stomach dropped, but I told myself she was just busy. When I walked into the cafe, she was already there, sitting at a corner table with her arms folded, coffee untouched. The look on her face made my steps falter. She wasn't just tired, she was angry. "You don't waste any time, do you?" she said the moment I sat down. I blinked. What? Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb, Alex. Half the office knows your boss showed up at your house with a marriage proposal. And you didn't think to mention that to me?" My mouth opened then closed. "Emma, I only found out last night. I was going to tell you today." She cut me off with a sharp laugh. "Today? After everyone else already knows? After I had to find out from Laura in accounting?" "That's not fair," I said, leaning forward. "I didn't ask for any of this. I was just as shocked as you." "Really?" Her voice rose slightly, drawing a glance from the next table. "Because from where I'm sitting it looks like you've been leading her on. Spending all that extra time in her office, staying late, accepting her little gifts." I shook my head hard. "It wasn't like that. I didn't even realize she felt that way about me. I swear, Emma, nothing happened. Her expression didn't soften. You expect me to believe you didn't notice? That you were just, what? Oblivious? You're smarter than that, Alex. I'm telling you the truth, I said, my voice breaking slightly. You're my friend. More than that, you're the person I care about. I wouldn't do that to you. Emma's gaze flicked away for a second, her jaw tightening. Then maybe you should have thought about how it looked before you let her get this close. I felt the sting of her words like a slap. So that's it? You're just going to decide I'm guilty without even listening? I have listened, she said, standing up and grabbing her bag. And I don't like what I've heard or what I've seen. I can't do this, Alex. She walked out without looking back. I sat there for a moment, staring at the chair she just left, my hands curled into fists under the table. The coffee between us sat untouched, steam slowly fading into the air. The rest of the day at work felt like moving through fog. Emma didn't look at me once. Conversations stopped when I walked by. I caught whispers, my name, Daniel's name, little snatches of speculation that made my stomach twist. When I passed Daniel's office, she glanced up from her desk, her eyes lingering on me for a moment before she went back to her papers. I didn't know if she'd heard about Emma, if she even realized what her proposal had set in motion. By the time I got home, my head was pounding. I dropped my bag by the door and collapsed onto the couch, the silence of the room pressing in on me. I kept replaying the look on Emma's face, the way she didn't believe me, the finality in her voice when she said she couldn't do this. It was strange how quickly something solid could crumble. Yesterday I had my work, my friend, my rhythm. Today everything felt fractured. Even my desk at the office didn't feel like mine anymore. As if the whole place had shifted subtly out of place. I wanted to tell myself Emma would cool down, that we'd talk again, that she'd realize I wasn't lying. But deep down I wasn't sure. And that uncertainty hurt worse than the argument itself. It was only the beginning, but already, I could feel the first cracks spreading through everything I thought I could count on. The days after my fight with Emma stretched out like an endless gray corridor, each one colder than the last. At the office, she didn't just avoid me. She erased me. If we passed in the hallway, she'd look past me as if I were a shadow on the wall. In meetings, she kept her gaze fixed on her notes, never acknowledging my presence. The easy banter we used to share was gone, replaced by an aching silence that followed me everywhere. But where Emma's presence had vanished, Daniel's seemed to grow. She started calling me into her office more often, sometimes for legitimate reasons, other times for tasks that felt like excuses. A small file review, a vague check-in, a conversation about a project I wasn't even directly working on. The walls of her office always seemed to close in a little when the door shut behind me. At first, I thought maybe she was just doing her job, but the pattern was impossible to ignore. If I was in the break room talking to someone, it wasn't long before an email popped up. Alex, can you stop by my office for a moment? If I lingered at my desk with Emma nearby, Daniel would appear in the doorway, coolly suggesting I join her to go over something urgent. It was subtle enough that no one could call it out, but obvious enough to make my skin prickle. And still the whispers followed me. I could feel them in the pauses when I walked past clusters of desks, in the sidelong glances people didn't quite hide. Conversations that had nothing to do with me would shift when I entered the room, voices lowering just enough to tell me they had. I caught my own name once, paired with a laugh and the words, "Well, you know why she's still here." I tried to bury myself in my work to keep my head down, but even the weight of my laptop felt heavier these days. Every time I opened a new document, my mind wandered, back to Emma's face, to Daniel's letter, to the suffocating sense that my life was no longer my own. The worst part was how quiet Daniel was about it all. She didn't push me for an answer to her proposal, didn't bring it up directly. But the silence was almost worse. It left me guessing, wondering what she was thinking every time she looked at me across her desk with those unreadable eyes. One evening, the office was nearly empty when she called me in again. I told myself it was just another last-minute review, something quick before I could go home. She was sitting behind her desk, the warm light from the lamp casting shadows across her face. "Close the door," she said softly. I hesitated but did as she asked, my pulse quickening. She gestured for me to sit, then leaned back in her chair, studying me. "I never wanted to hurt you, Alex," she said finally. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it, almost fragile. But I couldn't watch you give all your time to her. The words sank into me slowly, heavy and sharp at the same time. Emma, I asked even though I already knew. Her gaze dropped for a moment, then returned to mine. You don't see what I see. The way you light up when she's near. The way you forget I'm even in the room. I swallowed hard. She's my friend. That's all. Maybe for you, Daniel said. But for me. Every time I watched you walk past my office to sit with her, it felt like you were walking away from me. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to get angry, to tell her that my friendships were mine to choose, that she had no right to feel entitled to my attention. But another part of me heard the ache in her voice, the kind that comes from wanting something you know you'll never have. Daniel, I started, but the words tangled in my throat. She sighed and leaned forward, folding her hands on the desk. I know you don't feel the same way. I knew it before I sent that letter. But I thought, maybe if I did something bold, you'd see me differently. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not the strict, polished boss everyone else saw, but a woman sitting alone in a quiet office at the end of the day, trying to hold on to something she couldn't name without losing it completely. The air felt thick between us, like the room itself was holding its breath. I can't change how I feel about her, I said finally. But I never meant to hurt you either. Her lips pressed into a faint smile, one that didn't quite reach her eyes. I know. And that's why I wish I could stop feeling this way. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she looked away, signaling the conversation was over. I stood, unsure if I just stepped closer to understanding her or farther from anything we could salvage. When I walked out into the dimly lit hallway, the office felt even bigger and emptier than before. The sound of my footsteps echoed too loudly, each one pulling me away from her office but not from the weight of her words. And for the first time I realized just how small my world had become. Caught between two women, one who wouldn't look at me anymore and one who couldn't stop. By the end of that week, I knew I couldn't keep drifting through this strange, tense limbo with Daniel. Her proposal, Emma's absence, the way the office seemed to shrink around me, it was all pressing in too tightly. I needed to set boundaries to make sure she understood that whatever she was hoping for couldn't happen. So I asked if we could talk after work. Not in her office, not with the hum of computers and the risk of someone knocking on the door, but somewhere quieter. She suggested her place, and for a moment I almost said no, but I told myself this was about clarity, not comfort. Her apartment surprised me. I'd pictured something sleek and cold like her office, but it was warm and lived in, soft lighting, shelves lined with books, a few potted plants that looked well cared for. A framed photo of a golden retriever sat on the coffee table. His name was Jasper, she said when she noticed me looking. Had him for 12 years. There was something in her voice that made me think he was gone now. I just nodded, not sure what to say. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the quiet stretching between us until I finally said, Daniel, I need to be honest. I didn't expect your letter. I didn't know you felt that way about me, and I know you don't feel the same, she interrupted gently. Her voice wasn't sharp or defensive, just tired. I'm not angry with you, I said. But this, whatever you were hoping for, it's not fair to either of us if we don't acknowledge it. She looked down at her hands. I wasn't hoping for a fairy tale, Alex. I've been alone for a long time. And I didn't even realize how much until you started working for me. Something in her tone made me still. I've been married before, she continued. To a man. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't love, not really. We divorced after 5 years. Since then I've kept my distance from people. Easier that way. But you, she paused, exhaling slowly. You walked into my life like you belonged there. Not because you tried, but because you just were. You made the office feel less like a cage. Her words caught me off guard. I'd been bracing for manipulation, some attempt to guilt me into caring, but there was none of that. Just quiet honesty. I never meant to send the letter to your family, she added. Not at first. I wrote it and rewrote it for weeks. It was supposed to stay in my desk drawer forever. But then I saw you with Emma one day, laughing like the world had stopped, and I panicked. I thought if I didn't do something, I'd lose even the scraps of you I got to have. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the composed exterior. She wasn't the powerful, untouchable boss right now. She was just a woman, lonely and reaching for something she couldn't quite hold. "I didn't mean to hurt Emma," I said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied. "But I did. And I hurt you too." The weight of that admission lingered in the air. We didn't speak for a while. She rose eventually and went into the kitchen, returning with 2 mugs of tea. She handed one to me without a word, and when I took it, our fingers brushed. I sipped slowly, the warmth a welcome contrast to the heaviness of the conversation. Daniel watched me for a moment, then said, "You're shivering." Before I could protest, she disappeared into another room and came back with a thick, soft blanket. She draped it over my shoulders carefully, almost like she was afraid I might flinch. It was such a small thing, but it broke something open in me. A realization that her feelings weren't about control or possession. They were about care. A flawed, messy kind of care, but real nonetheless. "I'm not asking you to stay late in my office anymore," she said finally. "I'm not going to pull you away from people you care about. I just needed you to know why I acted the way I did." I nodded slowly, unsure if I felt lighter or heavier for having heard it. When I left her apartment that night, the city felt unusually quiet. I kept thinking about the way she'd wrapped the blanket around me, how her hands had trembled just slightly. And even though nothing had changed between us in the way she might have wanted, I understood her now. That understanding didn't make the situation any less complicated, but it did make it harder to see her as just my boss. She was something else now, something I couldn't quite define. And that, more than anything, was what unsettled me as I walked home through the dark BY Monday morning. The office felt off. Conversations dropped to whispers when I walked past. Eyes lingered longer than usual. My email inbox had exploded overnight, half with subject lines from HR, the other half from people I barely knew, asking for clarification on something I hadn't even heard about yet. It wasn't until Mia from accounting slid her phone toward me that I understood. The screen showed a grainy photo of me and Daniel at the company's holiday mixer. Her leaning in to say something, my face caught mid-smile. The caption: "Insider sources confirm junior exec Alex M. accepted her boss's proposal. #office romance #powerplay." There were threads of comments beneath it, hundreds of them. Some were congratulatory, others weren't. The post had already been shared to LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. And just like that, my private nightmare had become public gossip. By noon, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. My mother called twice, my sister sent a cryptic text, and my uncle left a voicemail that began with, "Is this true?" before going off on a rant about professionalism and family reputation. Emma didn't call. She didn't text. She just blocked me. Everywhere. HR summoned me to a glass-walled conference room that felt more like an interrogation chamber. The head of compliance sat across from me with a stack of printed screenshots. "We need to address this immediately, Alex," she said, her voice clipped. "Regardless of the truth, perception matters. These rumors, they're damaging." "I didn't accept anything," I said quickly. "Daniel." That's when the door opened and Daniel stepped in. She looked composed, but I caught the faint tightness around her eyes. "This is my responsibility," she said without hesitation. "I made a personal overture toward Alex." She declined. "The rumors are false." The compliance officer frowned. "Then why would this leak?" Daniel didn't blink. "Because I told one person in confidence and it spread. That's on me." Her words were like a shield sliding into place in front of me, blocking every dart that might have been aimed my way. I stared at her, willing her to glance at me, but she kept her eyes forward. "Given the nature of this, we'll need to review your position here," HR said to her. "This could be grounds for disciplinary action." "I understand," she replied. They dismissed us separately. I walked out feeling like my skin was too tight, my pulse in my ears. Later, when the building had emptied, I found her still in her office, staring out at the city lights. "Why did you do that?" I asked. "Because they would have eaten you alive," she said without turning around. "You're just starting here. You have a career to protect." "I don't." "That's not true," I said sharply. "You've built this place." She finally looked at me then, a faint, sad smile on her lips. "And maybe it's time I stop hiding behind it." There was nothing I could say that didn't feel inadequate. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to burn herself to keep me warm, but the truth was, she already had. The next day, a company-wide email went out. Statement from the CEO. In light of recent rumors, I wish to clarify that the personal matter involving myself and a member of my staff was misrepresented online. Responsibility for the situation is entirely mine. Please refrain from further discussion, as this is being handled appropriately. It was short, professional, and devastating in its finality. She'd thrown herself into the fire without a second thought. And as much as I wanted to see her as just my complicated, overreaching boss, in that moment all I could see was someone who had chosen to lose so I might keep something of my OW. And it was raining the afternoon I finally saw Emma again. She'd agreed to meet at a small cafe far from downtown, neutral territory, I guessed. She was already there when I walked in, hands curled around a steaming mug, her eyes flicking to me and then away like she wasn't sure if she wanted this conversation to happen. We sat across from each other in the kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of every clink of cutlery around you. I just need to understand, I said, breaking first, why you cut me off without even asking what happened. Emma's mouth twisted, not into anger, but into something like resignation. Because I already knew. Or at least, I thought I did. What's that supposed to mean? She stared at her coffee for a long moment before answering. You're not the first person to get close to Daniel. Years ago, before you even worked there, She stopped, inhaled slowly. I had feelings for her. Stupid, unrequited feelings. She never crossed a line, but I watched her pull away from me, and then one day she just wasn't part of my life anymore. When I saw you with her, I thought. You thought I was replacing you, I finished, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Her eyes flicked up to mine, pained but unapologetic. I didn't want to watch it happen again. So I left before it could hurt worse. It felt like someone had tilted the entire situation on its side, showing me a new angle I didn't want to see. All the tension, the rumors, the way everything had unraveled. Somewhere in its tangled roots was a quiet, unspoken jealousy I'd never known existed. By the time I left the cafe, I wasn't sure who I was angry at. Emma for walking away, Daniel for never mentioning it, or myself for not realizing how messy the web really was. 2 days later, Daniel called me into her office. The room looked different without her usual stack of neatly arranged files, the shelves half empty, a single box on the desk. I'm resigning, she said, almost casually. Effective at the end of the week. I felt the words in my chest more than I heard them. You don't have to. Yes, I do, she interrupted softly. This place can't breathe with me still here. And neither can you. I shook my head, searching for something that would make her stay, something that could undo the wreckage. But she just smiled, the kind of smile that says you've already made peace with a choice. She walked me to the door, then paused, her hand resting on the frame. Sometimes love isn't about having someone, she said quietly. It's about leaving them with a life free of your shadow. I wanted to ask if that was her way of saying goodbye, but she'd already turned back toward the window, her silhouette framed against the dim city skyline. I left without knocking again. And for the first time since this all began, the air between us was both unbearably heavy and completely still. The leaves had started to turn by the time I found myself walking past that little cafe again. The same golden light spilled through its windows, the same faint hum of conversation inside. This time there was no Emma waiting at a corner table. Just me slipping into a seat by the window. As I wrapped my hands around a warm cup, I let the thoughts settle in, quiet but certain. I thought I knew what love looked like. But maybe it was sitting across from me in an office all along and I never even saw it. I took a slow sip, watching the world blur beyond the glass, and let the moment fade into the hum of the city.